Ever wondered what lies behind those big imposing walls in the well-to-do tree-lined suburbs? Beyond the Hedge invites you into magnificent gardens created by renowned South African designers. Join me, Melanie Walker, as I take a closer look at how these gardens came about and better understand the features that bring them their status. You'll also get to meet innovators who take gardening to the next level. In today's episode of Beyond the Hedge, we'll visit a garden set in the agricultural outbounds of Johannesburg, where the owners wanted a structured garden and lots of running water. But first, we head to an estate in Pretoria, where an oddly shaped property has been maximised through clever design. Modern urban living necessitates that we don't have really large gardens to play with these days. Nothing like we have behind me at the moment. Obviously, if you're in rural areas, you've got a lot more space to work with. So what do you do if you do have a smaller space? Well, you borrow the landscape. And we've come to a garden where they've done exactly that. This formal garden, with its meticulous attention to detail, is the work of Craig Denecker from The Friendly Plant. Known for his hard landscaping that lends structure, I'm excited to see what he created in this property on the water's edge. Hey.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, and you?
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Where are we going? This way?
We're gonna hang out.
Okay. Craig, it's amazing that a small garden can actually look so big, and I don't think it has just to do with the incredible view that's in the background. It's a full garden, but it feels really big.
It's exactly the thing that happens when we're doing clusters and townhouses. You have what you perceive to be a small space, because there's nothing that really puts it into perspective. You're looking at a patch of lawn, maybe a little bit of paving. When you start populating the space with usable feature areas, whether it's a little fire pit area or a small patio or a pathway, and planting and defining the edges of the beds, suddenly the visual cues are there to reinforce in your mind in some subconscious level that there is actually more space available, because you can imagine yourself more specifically in those areas. And it happens all the time when we go and do a post-installation visit with a client, and they say, geez, this space feels so much bigger now, and we haven't changed the size of the space, but more how they use it.
Well, what was actually in here? Was it just a blank canvas?
It was just lawn. There was only lawn, and this tree was here. And there was a little bit of paving around the house. That was all that there was. Everything else came subsequent to that.
But it is like fantastic. I mean, there's so much planting in here, and for me as a plants person, I absolutely love that. I know you like your hard landscaping, but it's been done in such a way that everything's so soft. It's been completely softened up. Yeah,
so the little hardscape features, I always find those are the things that drag you out of the house, because they're places to sit, places to relax, and the planting helps to soften and create that the mood for the space. Whereas the hardscapes, while they also set a mood, they are practical in that you can lie down or sit or swim in those elements. And this particular garden, our clients love their garden, so they maintain it immaculately. I mean, it's one of the best maintained gardens in the country, I'm sure. It's really, their heart is in it. And that also makes a big difference, because you can install a magnificent garden the same way you can design a magnificent garden. If it isn't installed correctly, it's never going to fulfill the plan laid out in the design, and if it isn't maintained, it's never going to mature the way that it was intended.
Well, that's the thing, is that you need to create gardens for people or for yourself that you're actually going to utilize. Otherwise, there's no point in having one.
Yeah, it's like if you didn't have to drive to work every day and you don't enjoy driving, there's little point in buying a car. So with gardens, it's pretty much the same thing. If you're an avid gardener, you're going to be installing your own garden over time. You're going to enjoy that as a hobby. When other people are playing tennis or golf, you're going to be in your garden. For the most part, our clients are busy people, and when they're at home, they want to enjoy the space. And by having a nice sized yard doesn't necessarily mean that people enjoy it. I'm sure a lot of people have got acre stands that they go outside maybe 3 times a year and enjoy the space. So for us, part of what we do is not just sell a garden, we're selling a lifestyle, and ultimately the garden has to match the way that the people intend to use the garden. In most cases, once we've completed a garden, there's some kind of what we would call a destination in a garden, or a designer outdoor space. It'll have some element of paving or seating, a water feature perhaps for a bit of sound in the space. And ultimately, if you can do that, people will use the garden. It becomes another room in the house. It's not just a forgotten space that they see when they get in and out of their car twice a day or so.
I mean, here in South Africa, we have such amazing weather that we really should be outdoors and enjoying the fresh air instead of cooped up in our homes.
You know, in reality, even in wintertime, especially on the high veld, we've got phenomenally crisp blue skies. It feels like there's air conditioning outside and you've got the sun overhead. So there are probably 10 days of the year, other than when it's raining, that you wouldn't be able to use your garden in some way. But if you can imagine on a summer's evening where it's a nice temperature outside, you don't just have a little braai outside, but you eat outside as well. So, because a lot of people will braai outside, carry the food inside and then eat in a dining room environment. But it's a far nice experience to sit outside. After you've had your meal, you sit around a fire at a fire pit and enjoy a conversation. It's a whole different experience to just treating the outside area as a sort of a quick kitchen cooking area.
Well, I want to see what the other areas are that you've got in this little garden, because I can't see it from here because of all these wonderful plants. So you're going to take me for a walk down the garden path,
Let's have a look-see.
Okay.
Excellent.
Just because you have a garden that could be perceived as moderate in size doesn't mean you can't create a meandering experience. This garden with its pathways and interesting focal points allows for a journey whichever route you choose. It feels like we are completely secluded from the rest of the world. I cannot see anything else where we're sitting at the moment. I think that's what the joy of this garden is about.
It's very much got a number of different rooms in this garden where you are oblivious to the outside world. I mean, there's a public space for the residents of the estate. A few meters from us, there's a pathway for residents to use. A few meters from us, you're not aware of them at all. Even where we were sitting earlier on at the back end of the garden, you can't even see that from here. So it really does feel that each area you go into has a very specific feel about it, and it's very much isolated from the rest of the garden.
But I'm interested to know, with this garden, I mean, as you said, it was a completely blank space. Did you sit down with paper and work out the pattern that would work best in the space?
So we took a lot of lines off the entrance pathway. To line up the water feature plunge pool on the other side, because that's going to be a focal point, and then we started to work on the pathways around that, because it has to be wide enough for someone to walk comfortably. You don't want to have a very narrow pathway that you're going to fall over. Our client likes the formality of a formal garden with the hedges and the lollipops and all the little decorative elements. You'll notice there are millions of different types of pots and other artifacts in the garden, little obelisks and that type of thing. And ultimately we try to create different planting areas in amongst the hedges, so you can also take out from time to time and replace with different annuals. They like a lot of colour, so if you see this garden when it's in spring and summer, it looks completely different to the way it looks now, but it still has that framework. We're just about to head into winter now, and it still actually looks like largely a summer garden.
Well, it looks fantastic because it's a green and white garden, and it's so cooling, and that's one of the things that we also forget about doing in South Africa specifically, is creating a garden that is cool.
Yeah, because it makes you want to spend more time outside, especially in summertime. If it's too hot, unless you've got a swimming pool, which a lot of people don't have, you don't really want to spend that time outside unless you've got the sort of a place to have a little dip and cool down.
So what are some of the other features in the garden? We've got the fire pit, you've got a little kind of enclosed area where you can have dinner.
There are lots of little detailed spots. So coming from the driveway side, there's a long water feature with multiple spouts that sort of welcomes you towards the front door. Then there are a number of little raised pots with little plinths with formal hedges around. We built little lights into the plinths as well, so at night time they make a little glow. They're just little deck lights, so it's not like a searchlight. It's something that's going to add mood and atmosphere to the space. And then we've got a small seating area on the other side of the little plunge pool. We've got a little bench platform. We've got another platform for sun lounges. So if you are sitting out, you want to catch a tan, you've got the place for it. And then of course the fire pit area. But the house itself plays a big role, because you don't have to, in this instance, you don't have to always be in the garden to appreciate it. The patio is surrounded by the garden. So when you on the patio of the house, it almost feels like you in an outdoor space. You don't associate it as much with the house as you do with the outdoors. So
Because you've got it wrapped around you.
yeah,
It's enveloping
it's
you.
really a nice space.
All right, so there's another little exclusion area over there as well. I mean, it's just
There's
so
a small
many pretty places.
veggie garden at the back, which has got some raised planting areas with some herbs and veggies, and again little seating areas. So there are a number of places where you can actually come and sit down without bringing a chair with you, which is quite nice in a garden. If we do raised planting areas or fire pit areas, it's nice to always have some kind of built seating where you don't have to rely on taking a chair with you. You can just decide to take a seat.
Well, I think that the differences in height here for me are one of the things that I like. And I just know we could be 15 other people here in the garden and I wouldn't see any of them.
If you're a big entertainer, you can have 30 people here. You won't think that you've got more than 5 at any time because of the way you can meander through, take little walks through the garden. It actually lends itself to spending time walking through the garden. It's not just a space that you go and sit in. So this is a very unique garden in that sense.
Well, looking at the levels, it's quite difficult to see the actual form of the garden. So is there a place that we can go and have a look down from above?
Yes, absolutely. Nice patio areas that you can take a proper look at the garden. It's almost like a little 3D model that's in front of you.
Okay, well, let's go and have a
Let's
look.
go have a look. See.
Stay tuned as we make our way up to the first floor veranda, because after the break, we take a bird's eye view of this magnificent garden.